Call me simple, but when I'm reading a book or watching a movie, I want the story to start at the beginning. I don't often enjoy trying to piece together what is going on and why it's happening from some midpoint in the story. I get confused, I ask too many questions, and the experience is just less enjoyable for me and whoever is trying to enjoy the story with me. I can't tell you how many times Rob and I have been watching TV together, and I am trying to figure out what's going on, and I'm like, what is happening? Should I know what's happening? Is it okay that I don't actually know what's happening? And he's like, Arlene, just watch, just listen. If you just track, it'll make sense with you. And I'm like, okay, but the storyteller could have also just started at the beginning. So that means I like the beginning of the Bible. It starts with the words in the beginning. And so that's where we're also going to start with this study. And the Bible's beginning, it's remarkable. It sets it apart from other ways of looking at or understanding life and time. But before we get too far into the study, I just want to say something about the Bible because we're going to be referring to it a lot. The Bible is the book that the God of the Bible gave to tell people about himself. So who he is, what he's doing, and why he's doing it. In the Bible, God defines himself. If you've already opened up your homework book, you probably already noticed that I started with some definitions, and I did this just to make sure that we were clear on some important words that we'd be using and referring to, making sure that we understood the meaning and were on the same track, that we were under that same understanding and not operating from different assumptions, because that can be troubling, right? We saw that in that experience Rob and I had with the fajita. The whole experience was based on false assumptions. Rob had mistaken assumptions about what a fajita was. I had mistaken assumptions about what he believed a fajita was. Now, Rob can call what he made that day a fajita all day long. He can do it till he's blue in the face, but the truth of the matter is he's wrong. And not because I say he's wrong, but because the people who stand behind the fajita, who created it and are the originators of it, they say he's wrong. And they made it, and so they get to define it. We don't get to come to the fajita and stand above it and declare that it's something else. That's why when we're learning about the God of the Bible, we need to come to his word to see who is he, what is he doing, why is he doing it. He's told us that he's given us the Bible for that purpose. So if he's the one that we're trying to learn about, we have to let him define himself in the method that he chose to do it. And that's why in your homework, you're going to be looking at the Bible. And I've made every effort to present the different parts of the Bible that we're studying in the context in which they appear. But please feel very free to read the passages that surround the one you're studying that day, just to make sure that this is the case. So the entire Bible opens with 4 very important words. In the beginning, God. We see in the Bible that there is a definitive beginning. There's a starting point, but there's already someone who's there at that starting point. Isn't that fascinating? Before everything existed, God was already there. And since nothing else existed except for God, we see that God doesn't need anything else to exist. He exists apart from everything else, and he exists without a source or without a starting point. There is a lot of places in the Bible that we could go for examples that illustrate this, but one of my favorites comes from the second book in the Bible called Exodus. It's in Exodus chapter 3, and this is where we read for the first time the meaning behind God's personal name, which is Yahweh. And God has revealed it to a man who's named Moses. And Moses was part of a people group that were in terrible need. They had been enslaved and horribly mistreated by the Egyptians, and they needed deliverance from this situation. Otherwise, they were going to die. And in this time of desperate need, God appears to Moses and he says, I see you, I hear you, and I am coming to save you. And that in and of itself is amazing. But how God does it is even better, because God gets Moses' attention by appearing to him in a burning bush. So Moses is like walking along doing his shepherd stuff, and he sees this bush and it's on fire. but it's not burning up. And he's like, that is not normal. So he goes to check it out. And he's like, hey, what's happening here? Because fire needs fuel to burn, right? And so it feeds itself by consuming whatever source of fuel it's burning. And this fire, it doesn't need a source of fuel to keep on burning, and so it does not consume the bush. This fire was self-sufficient, and from this fire, God tells Moses who he is. And he says, my name, Yahweh, means I am who I am, or I will be what I will be. God's personal name comes from the verb to be. God will eternally be what he is, God, not relying on anything else to exist, unchanging and eternal. This is the God who was at the beginning, but who himself does not have a beginning. He's always been. He has no starting point. If he did, there would have to be someone or something that existed before he did, and so then that someone or that something would be first. But the Bible clearly says, no, God is in that first or beginning position. So after we read this, in the beginning God, Genesis 1:1 goes on to say, in the beginning God created the heavens and the earth. In the beginning there was nothing except for God, and then God created everything that exists out of absolutely nothing. So the Bible holds up God as the creator. And Merriam-Webster defines creator as one that creates by bringing something new or original into being. And so we can immediately see that God as creator is very different from us who at times create things as well. We can create wonderful things like fajitas, but we do it by rearranging or merging together stuff that already exists. The people behind the fajita, they did not create peppers and chilies and avocados. They simply took these things that already existed and put them together in a pleasing and enjoyable way. They were using their hands and pre-existing raw material. God created with no pre-existing raw material, and that puts him in a totally separate category than anything else that exists. He is separate. He is the creator, and everything else is the created. That means everything that has been created has its source or its origin in the creator. And if we think about the implications of just these two things that we can notice in the first verse of the Bible, we're like, man, the implications of that are huge, right? The implications of number one, God existing apart from, not needing anything or being dependent on anything else. And two, God created everything that exists. And that puts him in a totally different category than anything else that exists. And one of the implications that we can see if we think about it just for a little bit is God doesn't need us, but we need him. He can and has existed without us. We can't and have never existed apart from him. And hearing that can be a little bit jarring. It has huge implications of a shift in perspective from this culture that persistently claims that we are at the center of everything. And the first verse in the Bible says, no, God is. So before you freak out too badly, just think about the implications of God not needing you. Because when I think about it, I actually feel a huge sense of relief that God does not need my help to run the world. Because trust me, I can get pretty busy and distracted trying to run my own little world. And it's crazy hard and it's exhausting and it's impossible. There are way too many variables that I simply can't control. Even now, when my world has largely shrunk to the 6 people that I'm sheltering in place with, that means that there's 5 other uncontrolled variables in this situation. And I don't know how many that makes because I'm not very good at math, but if you're interested, feel free to do the math. And if I'm honest, I actually feel like I'm one of those uncontrolled variables sometimes because I want to behave in a certain way. I determine that I will behave in a certain way, and then I go and do something crazy and unplanned off the rails, and I create a chain of reactions that I didn't plan and I can't control. God not needing me is actually a relief. when I think about it. But what about the fact that I need God? Is that a relief, or is that a reason for me to be afraid? And I think that depends on who God is, doesn't it? And to find that out, we need to go to the word that he's given us, and we need to read it. We need to find out, is this a good thing? Is it a bad thing? What do we know about this God who needs no one and who needs nothing? What is he like? Is he remote? Is he distant? Is he cruel? Is he unpredictable? Because if those were true, that would not bode well for us at all. And we can spend the rest of our lives trying to get to the bottom of who God is, and we'll still never be able to understand completely because he's beyond our understanding. But that doesn't mean that we just, give up and walk away, because he has shown us enough of who he is that we can understand that part, and then we can trust him for the rest. And we do this with a lot of different things. We put our faith in things that we don't understand completely. And flying is an easy example, right? Most of us don't fully comprehend the complexities of lift and thrust that make flight possible. But we still get into airplanes in large numbers, or at least we used to, right? Airplanes that are piloted by people that we don't know, we often haven't met, and we can't interview to see, are you worth putting my trust in? But we do this because we understand enough about the theory of flight to feel relatively safe to get on that plane. We know enough about transportation safety policies and vetting procedures to put our trust in whoever is behind the controls. We've seen enough planes go up and come down safely to take the risk. So what do we know about this God of creation? Well, from what we've looked at already, we can see that he communicates. He gave us his word to tell us who he is, what he's doing, and why. So we can see, no, he isn't remote. He isn't distant. He's chosen to show himself to his creation. We already know that he's personal, right? He shared his personal name. The God of the universe shared his personal name with Moses in that encounter in Exodus 3. So we see God is personal. He's communicative. And in that Exodus 3 encounter, we saw that God wasn't cruel. He was kind. He came to Moses and Moses's people in a time of great need, a time when they were completely unable to help themselves. And he said to them, I have seen your affliction. I have heard your cries. I know your suffering, and I am coming to save you, to rescue you, to deliver you. And even better than that, in Exodus 3, verse 12, we read that not only is he going to rescue, save, deliver his people from a distance, in it, he would be with them. God with us. And if you were to keep reading the story in Exodus, you would see that it is, just like the name indicates in Exodus, the suffering people that God promised to deliver, he did. He led them out of the land of their troubles, and they were saved, and they were rescued, and they were delivered. That's what he said he was going to do, and that's what he did. So just from this story alone, we can see that God is predictable. Having shown us who he is, God asks us to put our trust in him, not blindly, but with a measure of faith. Faith is something we all exercise. It's just a matter of what are we going to put it in? Who are we going to put it in? None of us was present at the beginning. We're all exercising some faith in regards to what we believe about the beginning of the story. We could believe that there was no someone, just something, nothing personal, nothing planned, nothing feeling, just random chance. Richard Dawkins, he writes that the world is just blind, pitiless indifference. And if there is just a something, not a someone at the beginning, he's right. But the Bible says that he's wrong. The Bible says that there was a someone at the beginning who produced order and beauty and meaning that were an overflow of his own perfection. And this someone is a safe place for our hope and for our trust.